You ever been treated like a criminal? Just for trying to get home? That's how it started. No warning. No crime. Just a black woman walking across a parking lot with a bag of groceries. And suddenly I became suspicious, dangerous, disposable. Before I take you into what happened next, I want to welcome you to Underrated Black Voices, the channel where we bring to life the kinds of stories most people try to ignore. Stories of injustice, power, and of unapologetic truth. This one. It's a fictional retelling inspired by real events. So listen closely, but listen with care. I had just finished a double shift. 14 hours on my feet. All I wanted was a carton of oat milk, some eggs, and to make it home before my kids' bedtime. I parked my car. Yes, my car. Grabbed my bag and headed for the store. But when I came out, 2 officers were waiting. Not talking. Not smiling. Just standing there with hands twitching near their belts like they were waiting for something to go wrong. "Is this your car?" one of them asked, squinting like the sight of me hurt his eyes. He nodded. "Yes, it is." That's when he smirked. "Must be stolen. You don't look like someone who can afford that ride." Pause. Every muscle in my body wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I'd been here before, too many times. I knew that laughing at the wrong moment when you're black could get you cuffed or worse. "I have ID, I said instead, calm as still water. "And a badge number." But that only made things worse. "Oh, you think you're somebody now?" the second cop barked, circling behind me. "What are you, mall security?" They didn't check my ID. They didn't ask for my name. They asked to search my car. They called me aggressive when I asked for their badge numbers. They made me open my trunk in front of everyone like I was on display. Like I was a threat that needed to be contained. A white woman across the lot started filming. I saw her phone, saw the angle she had, like this was a show and I was the exhibit. Another passerby whispered to his girlfriend, "Damn, they're really going in on her." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I let them have their little performance. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew who I was. I let them finish, let them flex their power, thinking they'd won something. One of them even laughed as he leaned close and whispered, "You'll never be in a uniform like mine." I met his eyes, steady and calm. "I'll see you both at the precinct," I said softly. "In uniform." They burst out laughing. Loud. Mocking. The one with the buzz cut even clapped his hands like I'd just told the best joke of his life. "You'll see us," he repeated. "What, you working the front desk?" I turned, picked up my groceries from where they'd been tossed, and walked away. And they thought that was the end of it. They had no idea. The next morning, 8:15 sharp, I walked through the precinct doors. Fresh blues. 4 silver bars gleaming on my shoulders. The whole station paused like someone had hit mute. I didn't have to speak. I didn't have to point. The one who mocked me dropped his coffee. The other turned ghost pale. The laughter, replaced by stunned silence. I was the new deputy police chief. I stood before them not as a victim, not as a statistic, but as the woman in charge. And I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for justice. Because justice isn't rage. Justice is power, patience, and knowing exactly who you are, even when they refuse to see it. I didn't rush. I didn't stomp. I walked through that station with the calm, deliberate grace of someone who'd earned every step. The air changed the moment my boots hit the tile. Like the building itself recognized who I was, even if some of the men inside still didn't. There's a weight to wearing 4 silver bars. Not everyone understands that. It's not just about command. It's about history. Every time I put on that uniform, I carry the weight of every woman who was told to stay quiet, every black officer who was passed over, every veteran whose name was forgotten the moment they stepped off the battlefield. And as I crossed the squad room that morning, I carried that weight with pride. A young officer, white, maybe 25, started to stand when he saw me. "Deputy Chief Ellis," he stammered, his eyes darting toward the others. I nodded once, not with anger, with clarity, 'cause I remembered him. He was in the background the day before, behind the two who thought humiliating me in a parking lot was a badge of honor. He didn't say anything cruel, but he didn't stop them either. Silence has a sound, and sometimes it's louder than any slur. I reached the bullpen. Captain Reyes stood to greet me, an older Latino man who'd seen 25 years in this department and somehow still had a spine. We shook hands firmly. "Morning, Deputy Chief," he said. "Your office is ready. Let me know if you need anything." "I will," I said. "But first." I turned toward the two officers in question, now standing frozen by their desks. The same two who laughed in my face yesterday. They weren't laughing now. Officer Trent was the smirking one. Big, broad shoulders, square jaw, buzz cut. He looked like he'd walked straight off a recruitment poster. Officer Mills was the quieter one. Nervous eyes, twitchy fingers, the kind who follows a lead no matter how wrong it is. Neither moved. Neither blinked. "I believe you both met me yesterday," I said, voice steady, but loud enough for the whole room to hear. Mills opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Trent tried to square his shoulders again like he had something to prove, but even he knew better now. I didn't drag it out. I pulled 2 folders from my briefcase and placed them on Rhea's desk. "Internal Affairs complaints. Filed this morning. Log. With body cam footage requested under formal policy review." Still no one moved. I leaned in just slightly. "Don't worry," I said. "You'll have plenty of time to reflect. Effective immediately. Both of you are on administrative leave pending investigation." A gasp moved through the room like wind in tall grass. No shouting. No fanfare. Just 2 careers cracking beneath the weight of accountability. Because this wasn't revenge. It was protocol. I turned to Reyes. "Please escort them to locker clearance and revoke their access cards." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." As they were led away, I finally saw it. The thing they never expected to feel from a black woman in a position of power. Authority. Not fear. Not begging. Not rage. Just unshakable control. And they hated it. You could see it on their faces as they walked past the younger officers. The embarrassment, the disbelief, the dawning horror that they were the problem. And for the first time everyone saw it too. Once they were gone, I stepped into my office. It was clean. Bright. But I didn't sit right away. I stood by the window, letting the silence settle in. Out there the city kept moving. Traffic lights blinking. Buses humming. People going about their day, never knowing what had just shifted inside these walls. Because this wasn't just about 2 racist cops. This was about a system that had let them get away with it for years. You think this was the first time they harassed someone? Well, they just finally picked the wrong one. And I wasn't done. 2 hours later I called a department-wide meeting. Mandatory attendance. I stood at the front of the room, no podium, no mic. Just me. In full dress blues. Bars polished. Shoes shining. And a stack of personnel files beside me like a quiet warning. "I know some of you are surprised to see me here," I began. "Some of you may even be uncomfortable." Good. Silence. "I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to make this department accountable. 'Cause I know what some of you say when the doors are closed. I know the jokes, code words, the shoulder nudges. I know the random stops. The "I felt threatened." The looks. The assumptions. Still silence. A few shifting in their chairs. I've lived it. As a black woman. As a mother. As a soldier. As an officer. I let that sink in. I saw some heads nod. Others still frozen. I didn't come here to clean house. I came to build a better one. One where integrity isn't optional. Where your badge doesn't protect your ego. It protects the public. I picked up the stack of files and held them up. These are all complaints filed in the last 6 months, dismissed for lack of evidence or insufficient concern. That changes today. I'm reopening every single one. Few murmurs, but no one dared speak against it. "I know this makes me a target," I said plainly. "Good. I'd rather be a target for doing what's right than a coward for staying silent." I ended with one sentence. If you can't wear that uniform with honor, take it off now. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for praise. I walked out, back to my office, back to work, because this was only the beginning. The fallout didn't take long. By noon, whispers had spread across the entire department like wildfire. Some called it a witch hunt. Others called it long overdue. But no one could deny the shift in the air. A line had been drawn, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't blurred. I was in my office going through old complaint files when Reyes stepped in, shutting the door behind him. "You've got people rattled," he said, folding his arms. "Some of the older guys, Lieutenant Haskell, Sergeant Lowe, they're already grumbling." I didn't look up. Let them grumble. The system's only uncomfortable when it's being held accountable. Reyes gave a low whistle. "You sure you want to start this war on day one?" "It's not a war," I said quietly. "It's a reckoning." He nodded, but his eyes studied me carefully. "You're not wrong. But just know, some of these boys don't go down easy. Especially not to someone who looks like you." There it was. The unspoken truth. Not just a woman. Not just a black woman. A black woman in charge. "I didn't come here to go down easy either," I replied. That afternoon I met with Internal Affairs. We reviewed the body cam footage from the parking lot incident. It was worse than I remembered. One officer, Trent, clearly mocking my voice. Mills mimicking my walk behind me while I faced the trunk. And the most damning clip. Trent whispering into his mic. "Watch this, gonna make her cry." I didn't. But they would. I ordered the footage to be secured under Departmental Misconduct Protocol and forwarded a copy to the Civilian Oversight Board. I wanted a paper trail. I wanted transparency. No more backroom deals. No more swept under the rug violations. This department was going to change. Brick by brick. But the resistance came fast. The next morning I found my tires slashed. I stood there for a long moment in the precinct parking lot, staring at the damage. It wasn't subtle. All 4 tires. Knife slashes in clean, deep X's. Someone wanted to send a message. I didn't flinch. Called a tow truck. Filed a report. And when Reyes came out, red-faced and furious, I simply said, "Don't waste time investigating. Just pull the security footage." An hour later we had the footage. 2 uniformed officers, faces visible, names clear, cutting my tires at 2:13 a.m. and laughing as they walked off like it was nothing. They weren't from my squad, but they were part of the same rot. I filed another complaint, suspended both without pay. By the end of that day, my office was filled with silent glares, stiff greetings and fake smiles. But I didn't care, because every punishment sent a message. If you protect hate, you'll fall with it. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Detective Jalen Price. He'd left the department 5 years ago after filing a misconduct report that mysteriously vanished. A black detective with 20 years of service, and not a single promotion to lieutenant. He was good. Too good. And they made sure he never forgot where the ceiling was. "I saw your name on the news," he said. "Didn't think you'd actually come back here." "Neither did I admitted. "But this place needs disinfecting." He chuckled, but it faded quickly. "You're not safe." "I'm not scared." "You should be." I filed one complaint and they blackballed me out of the force. "You're swinging hammers at the foundation." "Good," I said. "Let it crack." There was a long silence. Then he asked, "You want help?" That question hit deeper than he knew. Not because I needed backup, because someone believed in what I was doing. "Yes," I said finally. "I want to see everything they buried. Every case. Every complaint. Every name." "I still have files," he said. "Kept copies. Thought one day, someone might care." I swallowed hard. "I care," I whispered. We agreed to meet the next night. Discreetly. But before I could hang up, he added one last thing. "They're going to come after you harder now. Not just your car. Your record. Your name." "I know." And if they can't break you, they'll try to erase me. He didn't respond. He didn't need to, because I already understood the cost. The next morning brought a new twist. An anonymous envelope sat on my desk. No name, no return address. Inside, a printed memo, 6 years old, signed by former Chief Wallace, now retired in Florida. It outlined a pattern of escalation policy advising officers to target known high-risk civilians in minority neighborhoods for preemptive field control. That phrase burned. Preemptive field control. They'd made racial profiling official policy, just hidden behind coded language. I took it straight to the oversight board. No hesitation. This was no longer about 2 officers. This was systemic rot. And I was done tolerating it. I walked into the weekly department briefing that afternoon and stood at the front, facing rows of stiff uniforms and folded arms. Before we begin, I said, holding up the memo, I want to address something. I passed copies down the rows. Watched their expressions shift, confusion, then shock, then something darker, fear. This policy, I said, was real. It was practiced. And it ends now. Today. Someone scoffed near the back. Another woke cleanup, a voice muttered. Found him. Sergeant Lowe. Late 50s. Permanent sneer. You have something to say, Sergeant. He stood. I've been on this force since before you knew how to drive. We did what we had to do to keep the streets safe. I stepped forward, calm but firm. And how many innocent people did you humiliate to feel safe, Sergeant? He didn't answer. Kept going. I'm not here to erase history. I'm here to make sure it doesn't repeat itself. So, if you're still loyal to a culture of silence, of fear, of racially targeted policing, I suggest you find another badge to wear. Because this department is changing, with or without you. No one clapped, but no one walked out either. And that was enough. By week's end, I had reopened 15 dormant cases. 5 officers were under review. Dozens of civilians had submitted new complaints after seeing me on the news. The tide was turning. But so were the shadows. That night, someone slipped a note under my apartment door. Back off. Or next time it won't be just tires. I sat on my couch, reading those words over and over. I wasn't rattled. I was ready. Because power doesn't come from fear. It comes from standing your ground. Even when the ground shakes beneath you. There's a line you cross when you stop being tolerated and start being feared. I crossed it the moment I didn't flinch. That anonymous threat under my door. It wasn't just intimidation, it was confirmation. Proof that whatever I was doing, it was working. The ones who had spent their whole lives untouchable were finally feeling the grip tighten. And they didn't like the pressure. The next morning, I filed a formal report on the note and requested an off-the-books surveillance sweep of my apartment building. I knew better than to trust the standard internal security route, not when the rot I was exposing still had hands in every drawer. While my apartment was being checked for bugs and entry points, I went to work like nothing had happened. Because that's what they didn't understand. You can't threaten someone who's already been through hell. I'd done tours overseas. I'd walked into burning houses, led raids in hostile neighborhoods, pulled screaming children out of backseat wrecks, buried friends who wore the same badge. Fear. That was an old enemy I'd already learned how to tame. But fury. That was new. And I felt it in my bones now. Cold, coiled, and patient. Around noon I got a text from Jalen Price. Got the files. You'll want gloves. We met that evening in the back of a closed auto shop he now co-owned in the West Side. A nondescript building with peeling paint, covered windows, and a garage door that groaned like it hadn't been oiled in years. It was the perfect place to share the kind of truth that had to stay hidden until the right moment. Jalen looked older than I remembered. Gray in his beard, a quiet weariness in his eyes, but his spine was still straight, still defiant, still him. He handed me a box, weathered, dented, but sealed tight. Everything I could save before they scrubbed me out, he said. 28 complaints. All filed. All ignored. I opened the lid and froze. Photos. Testimonies. Handwritten statements from Black residents, many of them describing the same pattern. Unlawful stops, excessive force, silence when they demanded justice. But that wasn't the worst of it. Near the bottom was a folder marked Mason. I pulled it out slowly. Inside, a police report redacted in thick black lines. Mugshot. Child's face. Swollen lip. Torn shirt. 14. Name. Elijah Mason. The file said he'd resisted arrest. The witness statements told a different story. He'd been riding his bike home from school. A patrol car had pulled up beside him. Claimed he matched a suspect. No description ever released. No charges ever filed. But he'd come home with a broken wrist and a cracked tooth. And the officer responsible, Officer Trent, the same Trent who mocked me, who slashed my tires, who was now under review. I stared at Elijah's picture until my hands shook. Jalen's voice broke the silence. He tried to press charges. His mom did everything right. Filed paperwork. Showed up to every hearing. You know what happened. Already knew. But I needed to hear it. The case was dismissed for lack of evidence, he said. And 2 weeks later, Trent got promoted. I clenched my jaw until it ached. Where's Elijah now? Jalen sighed. Dropped out of school last year. Last I heard, he's couchsurfing in East Monroe. Got picked up twice for loitering. They don't even bother hiding the pattern anymore. I closed the folder. Carefully. Deliberately. Not anymore, I said. I left the shop that night with a fire behind my ribs. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. The next morning, I requested a subpoena for Elijah's sealed medical records and filed a request to reopen his case under the department's new misconduct accountability policy, something I had written and enacted only weeks earlier. By noon, the news had gotten out. Deputy Police Chief reopens teen assault case against decorated officer. They painted it like a betrayal. I called it justice delayed. The backlash came swift. An anonymous op-ed appeared in the Metro Examiner claiming I was pursuing a personal vendetta against officers who upheld the law. Social media accounts I'd never seen before began blasting my past, pulling photos from my college days, questioning my loyalty, suggesting I was too emotional to lead. One even posted a photoshopped image of me behind bars. But none of them posted Elijah's swollen face. None of them talked about the bruised black boys who learned to fear the badge before they learned to shave. They wanted to make this personal. So I made it professional. That evening I held a press conference. Not behind a podium. Not in a closed room. I stood on the front steps of the precinct, wind cutting through my dress blues, and looked directly into every camera. This department has a duty, not just to enforce the law, but to honor it. That means correcting past failures, acknowledging harm, and holding our own accountable when they abuse the public trust. I held up Elijah's photo. This is not a vendetta. This is a promise. To every parent who filed a report and never heard back. To every kid who got handcuffed without cause. To every voice ignored because it wasn't loud enough, white enough, or safe enough to be heard. Took a breath. And if doing my job makes me a target, then so be it. I didn't come here to be liked. I came here to lead. When I walked back inside, my hands were trembling. But not from fear. From purpose. That night, I got a call from Elijah's mother. Her voice cracked before she even said hello. I thought no one would ever believe us, she whispered. I believe you, I told her. And this time I won't let them bury it. Before she hung up, she said something I'll never forget. Thank you for reminding them that black lives don't end at the arrest report. The next day, a new email arrived in my inbox. Anonymous. Subject line. You're next. No message. Just a photo. My son's school. His classroom window. I sat there, staring at it, rage and terror boiling together into something I couldn't name. That was the moment I knew. We weren't just threatening their comfort anymore. We were threatening their control. And they were willing to do anything to keep it. But they made one mistake. They brought my child into it. And if they thought Deputy Chief Ellis was dangerous before, They hadn't met Maya the mother. They crossed the line the moment they dragged my son into it. That photo, blurry but unmistakable, showed his classroom window, just beyond the metal fence of St. Adrian's Elementary. He was inside. I could barely make out his silhouette through the glass. Smiling. Unaware. But I wasn't. 'Cause I'd seen this tactic before. Overseas. In war zones. In cartel raids. In corrupt precincts that used families as leverage to silence truth. And now they were using it on me. I stared at that image for a long time, alone in my office, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. I could have called the school, pulled him out, sent him away. But that's not what they wanted. They wanted panic. They wanted fear to do what intimidation hadn't. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Agent Riley," I said when he answered. "I need a favor. Off the record." He didn't hesitate. "What kind of favor?" "I need a security detail for my son. Armed. Invisible. Starting tonight." There was silence. Then, "How bad is it?" They took a picture of his classroom window. Another pause. Then sharper. "Send me the photo." I did. Less than 10 minutes later he called back. "That angle. That lens. That wasn't taken from the street." Closed my eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying whoever took this was inside school grounds. Likely faculty. You're dealing with professionals, Maya. Former law enforcement. Or current. And very comfortable with surveillance." He nodded. "Send me your best. Discreet. Keep him safe." "You got it," Riley said. "And Maya." "Yeah. You know this won't stop, right? Not until you hit back harder than they ever imagined." I looked at the photo again, then at the files still spread across my desk. Elijah Mason, the internal affairs reports, the redacted memos no one wanted to admit existed. "I'm done hitting back," I said. "It's time to take control." That night, I met with Jalen again, this time in the back booth of a jazz bar where the music was loud enough to drown out microphones. We kept our conversation brief, coded, and tight. "I've got enough to expose half the command chain," he said, tapping a thumb drive against the table. "But if you go public with this, they'll come at you like a pack of wolves." I took the drive, slid it into my inner jacket pocket. "They already have." He studied me a long moment. "How bad is it?" "They threatened my kid." His eyes darkened. "Then burn it all down." I left the bar and went straight to my apartment. 2 plainclothes agents were already stationed in the lobby, posing as maintenance crew. A third was walking the perimeter. My son was home, playing video games like it was just another night. His laughter echoing down the hallway. I kissed him on the head, sat beside him for a moment. "Everything okay, Mama?" he asked, glancing at me. He nodded. "It is now." But deep down I knew things had shifted. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about the system, the culture, the quiet policies written in invisible ink, the unspoken codes passed down from desk to desk, locker to locker. The next morning, I did what no deputy chief had done before. I walked into the Internal Affairs office with a sealed envelope labeled, "Initiate Phase 0. The man who received it, a black lieutenant named Harris, opened it, read the contents, and slowly looked up. "You're serious." "Dead serious," I said. "This department's going to answer for everything." Phase 0 was a protocol I'd written during my time at the National Police Accountability Task Force. It was extreme, unprecedented, and designed for one thing only: total forensic audit, body cam reviews, complaint reevaluations, unexplained promotions, patrol route inconsistencies, racial stop discrepancies, everything. "I want an independent civilian task force brought in," I added. "Not just oversight board puppets. Real people. Real power." He exhaled slowly. "This is going to get ugly." I gave him a tight smile. "It already is." By end of day, over 20 officers had been flagged for secondary review. 3 captains were placed under internal suspension. Every patrol car was recalled for audit. The station. In chaos. Whispers turned to outright muttering. Doors slammed harder. Some desks were cleared quietly. Early retirements filed with shaky hands. But not everyone resisted. Officer Jameson, a young white rookie, approached me outside the coffee machine. "I saw what you did for that kid, Elijah. I've been on ride-alongs where things didn't feel right, but I didn't know what to do." "Now you do," I said. "I want to help," he said. I studied him a moment. "Then document everything. Patterns. And don't lose your nerve." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." That night, I uploaded Jalen's files to a secure drive and sent encrypted links to 3 trusted journalists. 2 local, 1 national. With it, I included the redacted memo, the Elijah Mason file, and the Phase 0 announcement. Then I waited. Morning came with fire. Breaking news. Deputy Chief launches full corruption probe into police department. Whistleblower files emerge. The story hit like a tidal wave. National syndication. Social media exploding. The mayor forced to hold an emergency press conference, praising the courage and transparency of our leadership. Meanwhile, city officials scrambled to spin it as a planned reform. But I knew better. I'd set the match. Now the whole system had to watch itself burn. And yet, through the heat of it all, the resistance didn't stop. That afternoon, I returned to my car after a briefing, and found a dead bird nailed to the windshield. A black feather tucked in its beak. No note, just symbolism. But I didn't call it in. Took a photo. Then got in the car and drove to the Pentagon Intelligence Liaison Office. Had clearance. I'd earned it years ago after advising on police training protocols in post-conflict zones. Now I needed them to dig deeper. "Find out who's coordinating the retaliation," I told the officer in charge. "This isn't just random resistance. It's tactical. Someone's pulling strings." He tapped a few keys. "Do you have a name?" I did. And I said it. Former Chief Wallace. The same man who'd signed the racist memo 6 years ago. The same man who retired with full honors in a beachfront mansion paid for by quiet donors and silent handshakes. The agent nodded slowly. "We'll look into it. But Maya, if you go down this path, it won't end in paperwork." I looked him dead in the eye. "I'm not here to write memos. I'm here to finish what I started." The name Wallace still echoed in my head as I left the Pentagon's liaison office, the sound of it like the stench of rot in an old basement. Faint but undeniable. Chief Wallace wasn't just a former department head. He was a relic, a tactician in backroom policy. A man who perfected the art of hiding racism behind phrases like pattern anticipation and community safety metrics. A man who taught others how to weaponize the badge. Quietly, efficiently, and without leaving fingerprints. The deeper I dug into the files Jalen had given me, the clearer the picture became. Wallace hadn't simply encouraged misconduct. He'd engineered it. Built a pipeline of loyalists who got promoted for looking the other way. Officers like Trent, like Haskell, like Mills. They didn't act alone. They were following a doctrine. And worse, that doctrine didn't die when Wallace retired. It evolved. I returned to the precinct that afternoon to find my inbox overflowing with more anonymous threats. Photos of me in uniform, taken from angles that shouldn't have been possible. Audio recordings clipped from briefings I'd held behind closed doors. They wanted me to know, "We're watching you." But they still didn't understand the kind of woman they were dealing with. I didn't scare. Plan. So I called a meeting. Not in the briefing room. In the basement. I handpicked every officer who walked through that door. Young, old, black, Latino, Asian, even a few white officers I knew were clean. Men and women who had either spoken up before or had quietly reached out after Elijah Mason's file went public. They sat in a circle. No rank. No uniforms. Just people. "I brought you here," I began, "because I'm done playing defense." They listened. "There's a structure in place, built years ago by men like Wallace, that still controls how this department operates. That structure doesn't care about justice. cares about loyalty, silence, tradition. I looked around the room. You want to know why the same names keep coming up in these complaints? Why the body cam footage always goes missing? Why no one ever gets fired until a civilian dies? A few officers nodded grimly. It's not coincidence. It's design. I placed a thick binder on the table. This is the chain. Inside were names. Evidence of disciplinary reports that vanished. Cases reassigned just before they made headlines. Officers shielded from IA probes. A shadow chain of command. It's time we break it. Sergeant Anika Dove, a black woman who'd served 16 years without a single reprimand, leaned forward. You think we can dismantle that without blood on the walls? I looked her dead in the eye. I don't want blood. I want truth. She smiled faintly. Then I'm in. One by one they followed. We called ourselves the Ledger, because we were going to balance it. That night, I sat in my car across from Wallace's gated estate just outside the city. Security cameras on every corner. A hired guard stationed near the entrance. All that protection, for a man who claimed he had nothing to hide. I watched him through binoculars as he watered his roses. Composed. Smiling like a man who had outlived every consequence. He thought he was safe, because people like him never expected the consequences to wear a badge too. The next morning the Ledger moved. Detective Lynn, one of our members, hacked into the old precinct archive Wallace used to run before retirement. It took hours, but she recovered a locked database with over 200 files, internal memos, complaint reviews, and most shockingly, promotion approvals tied to silence clauses. Every officer promoted under Wallace's reign had to sign a form waiving public departmental criticism and agreeing to discretionary unity. In other words, shut your mouth and rise. That was the cost of a promotion in Wallace's world. Stay silent or stay broke. I printed the forms, redacted the officer names, then leaked them. The story hit every local news outlet by dawn. Exclusive. Leaked documents reveal police promotions tied to loyalty silence contracts. The city exploded. Protests reignited. The mayor called a state of internal review. And Wallace, he did the one thing cowards always do. He ran to the media. At a press conference from his country club, he stood behind a podium, polished and smirking. These accusations are not only baseless, he said. They are a disgrace to the men and women who risk their lives every day. He never mentioned the forms. Never denied the database. Instead he pivoted. Blamed me. He called me reckless. Dangerous. A destabilizing force. He ended with a warning. This is what happens when you hand over a badge to someone more interested in revenge than law. I turned off the TV in my office. Silent. Then stood. And walked straight into the press room downstairs. Dozens of reporters still buzzing from Wallace's broadcast. When they saw me, cameras snapped up like pistols. I faced them calmly. I wasn't going to respond to Mr. Wallace, I began. But then he made it personal. I held up a single sheet of paper. This is my oath of office. The day I was sworn in. It doesn't mention loyalty to former chiefs. It doesn't promise silence. Promises truth, justice, and public service. I leaned forward, voice steady. So let me say this as clearly as I can. If defending black children from unlawful beatings is reckless, then I'm guilty. If investigating dead birds on windshields and photos of my son's classroom makes me destabilizing, then I accept the label. Beat past. And if shining a light on a decades-long culture of racist policing makes me dangerous, then maybe this department was never safe to begin with. I walked out before the questions started. The next day, the mayor's office issued a formal subpoena for Wallace's files. The dominoes were falling. But even as the city's eyes turned toward the past, the threat around me grew colder. Harper. That evening I got a call. From the agent monitoring Wallace's estate. There's chatter on a private encrypted channel, he said. Former operatives. Maybe old friends from his command days. Chatter about what? You. Was. They're talking about removing the source. I swallowed. How serious? Enough to assign a federal detail. I rubbed my temples. Do it. Quietly. As I hung up, my eyes drifted to the framed photo on my desk. Me and my son, laughing outside the academy on my graduation day. I was in uniform. He was holding my hat. That picture reminded me why I started all of this. Not to be a hero, but to make sure he'd never have to be one just to survive. They wanted me to fold. They wanted me to disappear beneath the weight of their threats. But they forgot something vital. I built my strength in silence. Now I was using it to make noise. They always expect black women to break quietly, to shrink under pressure, to smile through the threat, to keep the peace while they dismantle our dignity. One insult, one system, one silence at a time. But I wasn't raised to break. And I sure as hell wasn't built to bend for men like Wallace. The morning after the federal detail was activated, I arrived at the precinct early. Before sunrise, before the phones started ringing, before the vultures with microphones circled the front steps again. The building was still, almost peaceful. But I knew better than to be fooled. Peace in places like this was always the calm before the riot. I unlocked my office door and froze. There, sitting on my desk, was a single item. A pair of handcuffs. Clean. Polished. Laid neatly on top of my framed oath of office. No note. No fingerprints. Just a message. But they made one critical mistake. They left those cuffs open. And I never left doors like mine unlocked. Which meant someone had a key. Someone inside. I called a quiet alert to internal security and requested a full review of access logs. As the report queued up, I stared at the cuffs again. Not with fear. With resolve. Because now I knew. The rot wasn't just from the old regime. It was still here. Embedded in the walls. Wearing a badge. And I was done playing chess. I was flipping the damn board. I called the ledger back into action. We reviewed security footage, badge swipes, late-night logins, even printer history. Officer Lynn cross-referenced retirement files with recent anonymous tip-offs. Dove pulled personnel records on anyone tied to Wallace's last 5 years. And Harris from Internal Affairs delivered the final puzzle piece. A whistleblower. He worked in records. Young. Nervous. But brave enough to bring us what we needed. Hard drive. Encrypted. Hidden under dummy payroll entries. Contained over 1,000 audio files. Each one recorded off the books, from old briefing rooms, locker rooms, call-ins. Conversations Wallace and his loyalists never thought would be heard again. But now I had them. And at timestamp 18 hours 27 minutes and 34 seconds in file 246, I heard it. Wallace's voice. Clear as day. If Ellis ever comes back, he said, we don't threaten her. We destroy her. Quietly. From the inside. Silence. Then another voice replied. Lower, colder. Already got someone planted. That was it. 2 lines. But 2 lines that cracked the whole damn foundation. They had someone inside my team. And I needed to find them before they moved again. I called a private meeting with Captain Reyes that afternoon. He'd been quiet lately. Watchful but never disloyal. He listened carefully as I laid it out. You think it's someone on your task force? He asked. I think it's someone who has access to my calendar, my building pass, and my office. That narrows it down. He leaned back. You want a full sweep? No, I said. I want bait. That night I scheduled a false briefing. Labeled it Reinstatement Review, Trent and Mills. I set it for 7 a.m. the next morning, before normal staffing hours. Then I placed a decoy folder on my desk with a red tag that read, Unredacted. I left the building at 6 p.m. By 6:47 a.m. the next day, the trap was sprung. Security logs flagged unauthorized entry at 6:12 a.m. Footage showed a uniformed officer entering with a master key and attempting to photograph the contents of the red-tagged folder. The officer, Sergeant Lowe, the same one who scoffed at me during the Elijah Mason case briefing. The same one who called me a destabilizing force behind my back. And now, he was caught red-handed. I didn't drag him into my office. I had him arrested. In front of the entire department. No warnings. No negotiation. Just cuffs, silence, and a one-way walk out of the building. This time they didn't laugh. They listened. Later that day, with the chain of betrayal finally exposed, I held a closed-door meeting with the mayor and the Civilian Oversight Board. I laid it all out. The files. The threats. The planted officer. The Wallace Doctrine. Everything. The room went cold. The mayor, a woman who had publicly supported me but privately walked the fence, folded her hands. What exactly are you asking for, Deputy Chief? I looked each of them in the eye. An emergency purge. They blinked. Continued. Every officer tied to Wallace's doctrine. Every contract tied to loyalty promotions. Every file that shows a pattern of targeting black neighborhoods under the guise of high crime zones. I want it reviewed. I want it audited. And I want it done under federal supervision. Long pause. Then, to my surprise, the mayor nodded. You'll have it. 3 days later, the purge began. 15 officers placed on immediate leave. 7 pending indictments. 2 internal affairs investigators resigned under pressure. And Wallace, he fled the state. But not before I sent a final letter. No threats. No rage. Just one line. Even your shadows can't hide you now. By the time the national media caught wind of the operation, it was too late for damage control. The city had become a symbol of something they never expected. A department confronting itself. CNN called it the Ellis effect. Others called it a reckoning. But I didn't care about headlines. Cared about results. Elijah Mason's case was reopened. His family received a formal apology, and he was placed in a youth mentorship program I personally funded. My son, still guarded, still smiling, still safe. The officers of the Ledger, promoted, protected, empowered to keep fighting. And me. I stood in the exact same parking lot where Trent once asked me if I stole my own car. Same shoes, same stance. Only this time, I wasn't alone. Reporters circled, cameras rolled, and the community, my community, stood behind me, took one breath, and said what needed to be said. You can harass a woman, you can ignore her badge, you can threaten her family, but if she's built from fire, she will burn the lies down to ash. And from those ashes, she will build justice. The city was watching now, not with skepticism, not with doubt, with something sharper, something that came from deep in the gut, where truth starts to feel like a heartbeat. Oh, they called it the Ellis Reform on every local news channel. My name was suddenly in press headlines, on op-ed covers, woven into activist chants. They wanted interviews, speeches, profiles. They wanted to make me into a symbol. But I didn't come here to be a symbol. I came here to tear down the scaffolding of corruption and build something that could stand without shame. Still, it felt like something had shifted beneath my feet, like a tremor rippling under the foundations of power. And when things shift that fast, you learn to check the walls before you breathe easy. I didn't trust the silence, because the more the system looks like it's listening, the deeper it hides its knives. That was proven the following week, when the federal task force delivered their preliminary audit of the department's complaint system. Out of 614 use-of-force complaints filed in the last 10 years, only 9 had resulted in formal investigations. Out of 614, of those 9, 0 led to disciplinary action. I stared at that number like it had punched me in the throat. I reread the report 3 times, looking for typos, hoping, praying it was wrong. It wasn't. And buried in those findings was another detail. More than 70% of the complaints came from Black and Latino civilians. But they were coded, softened with phrases like subject exhibited agitation, or did not comply promptly. I knew what those words really meant. They spoke up. They didn't shrink. They refused to be afraid. And for that they were punished. I walked into the next command meeting and laid the audit summary flat on the table. Read it, I said. Some did. Some didn't bother. Captain Reyes looked furious. Anika Dove just shook her head, whispering something under her breath. Then one lieutenant cleared his throat. Deputy Chief respectfully. How far back are we supposed to go? Some of these officers are retired. Others are dead. Do you want to prosecute ghosts? No, I said, quiet but steady. I want to bury the ghosts with truth, not silence. He tried to argue, tried to pivot toward morale and public perception. Said the reforms were causing tension on the street. That's when I lost it. You want to talk about morale? Snap. Try telling that to the kid who watched his brother get slammed against a cruiser for walking home. Try telling that to Elijah Mason's mother, who was told her son looked like trouble. Try telling that to the officers who did the right thing, who filed the reports, who spoke out, and got demoted or driven out. Silence. You want morale. Clean the rot. After the meeting I went home and sat with my son. We made dinner. Pasta. He grated the cheese while I chopped onions, and for a few minutes the world outside disappeared. He was 12 now, tall for his age. Eyes like mine, sharp, alert, older than they should have been. At one point he asked, "Mom, are you gonna get hurt doing all this?" I stopped slicing. I looked at him. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I have to try." He nodded slowly. "Can I still be a cop one day?" That hit me harder than any headline ever could. I set the knife down, walked around the island, pulled him into my arms. "You can be anything you want," I whispered. "But if you become a cop, you're going to change it from the inside. Just like I'm doing now." That night, after he went to sleep, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering how many other mothers had made promises like that. Wondering how many of them lived long enough to keep them. The next day, the ledger discovered something buried even deeper than we'd imagined. Buried inside the department's retirement fund were a series of silent payout contracts, bonuses paid to officers who resigned early after misconduct allegations were raised. It was hush money. Over $1.3 million paid out across 15 years. Wallace had signed off on most of them. But two. Signed by acting captains. Still active. This wasn't just a past failure. It was current policy. That afternoon I called the mayor. She picked up on the second ring. "We've got payout documents," I said. "Ongoing. 2 current captains involved." Silence. Then, "Maya, if you make this public." "I already did." Another pause. "Maya, I'm not asking for permission." She exhaled. "Then I'll have to stand behind you. But they're going to try to paint you as radical. As unhinged." Smiled. "Let them. History's already written who stayed silent." That evening I held a televised address. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't polished. It was me. Standing in front of the precinct. Cameras rolling. Reporters everywhere. "Some people say I'm dismantling tradition," I began. "That I'm disrupting morale. That I'm making the job harder for officers just trying to do their work." I held up the audit summary. "You know what makes the job hard? Knowing there are families who never got justice. Knowing officers who did the right thing were punished while predators were protected. Knowing this department paid men to leave quietly instead of confronting the harm they caused." I looked straight into the lens. "So here's what happens next." I laid it out. Public database of disciplinary records. A new civilian-led justice review board with subpoena power. Mandatory racial bias training with real certification. And an official review of every payout made in exchange for resignation. Wallace's era was over. This was the new code. Not built on silence, but on accountability. After the speech I went back inside. No applause. No parade. But I saw it in their faces. Even the ones who didn't agree. Respect. Because I hadn't backed down. Not when they mocked me. Not when they slashed my tires. Not when they sent me death threats. Not when they put my son at risk. And not when they left handcuffs on my desk. I didn't bend. I rose. Now the only question left was, would they rise with me? or get buried under the weight of the truth they tried so hard to deny. Some fights end with a bang. Mine ended with a microphone. 4 weeks after the televised speech, the Department of Justice formally opened a federal case into the city's past law enforcement misconduct, citing the overwhelming evidence submitted by my office, whistleblowers, and public audits. For the first time in this department's history, leadership wasn't simply questioned. It was indicted. 2 captains, 3 retired officers, 1 internal auditor, and Wallace. He was subpoenaed, not as a retired chief, as a suspect. The shock reverberated through every corner of the city, through the community that had grown numb to silence, and through the precinct that had spent decades betting on the darkness to protect them. I remember walking into the station the morning after the indictments were announced. Every officer stood, not out of fear, not out of protocol, out of something far heavier. Reckoning. I walked past them without a word, straight into my office. The sun was already cutting across the blinds, painting long shadows across my desk. I sat in the same chair where they once left handcuffs for me like a joke, and stared at the report that had just come in from the Civilian Oversight Board. Final review. Internal culture audit, post-phase 0. Opened it. The numbers told the story better than any headline could. Racially targeted stops had dropped by 46%. Civilian complaints down 38%. Body cam compliance at 100% for the first time since implementation. 3 former whistleblowers rehired into new oversight roles. Community Trust Index up by 27%. Progress. Not perfection, but progress. Still, the storm hadn't fully passed. The week before Wallace was due to testify, an attempt was made on Jalen Price's life. Drive-by. Quiet. Precise. 2 shots fired into his vehicle while parked outside his home. He survived barely. The bullet missed his spine by inches. But the message was clear. They still had shadows. Still had teeth. I visited him in the hospital. He looked at me, his voice hoarse but fierce. "You finish this," he said. "Don't let these bastards rewrite the ending." He nodded. "I won't." And I meant it. The day Wallace arrived in court, the city went still. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Protesters chanted. Reporters barked into live feeds. He wore a gray suit. His cane clicked with each step. But his face stone cold. He didn't speak to anyone. Didn't look at the crowd. But I watched from the gallery, seated near Elijah Mason and his mother. My son beside me, holding my hand. His palm sweaty but steady. When Wallace took the stand, he denied everything. Called it a witch hunt. Political stunt. Said I had manufactured outrage. But when the prosecution played the audio file, his voice clear and arrogant, talking about destroying me quietly from the inside, you could hear the silence thicken like cement. And when the former records officer testified, that silence cracked. He read the contents of the payout contracts out loud. Every name, every dollar, every policy that shielded the guilty while punishing the honest. Wallace's eyes never left the floor. The trial lasted 2 weeks. On the 15th day, the jury returned. Guilty. Federal obstruction of justice. Destruction of public records. Coercion of testimony. His sentence, 12 years in federal prison. It wasn't justice for everything, but it was a start. After the verdict, I stood outside the courthouse. They asked me for a quote. Something for the cameras. Something to satisfy the nation's hunger for headlines. I gave them 5 words. He didn't break me. We built. Then I walked away. Because there was nothing left to prove. Weeks passed. And slowly, the dust settled. Reform wasn't flashy. It was in the way patrol routes were redrawn to prioritize community interaction over intimidation. It was in the weekly trainings, where new recruits listened to victims speak instead of being taught to fear them. It was in the mural that went up outside the precinct, painted by local artists, showing faces of those once ignored, now remembered. And it was in the letter I received from Elijah Mason. It said, "Deputy Chief Ellis. I used to think I didn't matter. that they could do whatever they wanted to me and nobody would care. But you did. Thank you for seeing me. For believing me. For making it matter. I'm applying for the Police Explorers program this fall. I want to do what you did. But maybe without the war. Elijah cried. Not from pain. But from something stronger. From the knowing that I'd planted a seed where a scar used to be. My son saw the letter, read it quietly and said, "He's brave." Smiled. So are you. That night, as I stood on the balcony of our apartment, watching the city breathe under the glow of a new future, I finally allowed myself to exhale. We weren't finished. The work would go on. There were still dark corners to clean. Still stories that hadn't been heard. Still names on files waiting for justice. But we weren't afraid anymore. 'Cause we remembered who we were. And more importantly, we made sure they'd never forget. If you're hearing this story and something in your chest is burning, then good. Let it burn. Let it ignite your voice. Let it fuel your change. And if you ever find yourself face to face with injustice, don't bow. Don't rage blindly. Expose. Because justice isn't rage. It's power, patience, and knowing exactly who you are, even when they don't. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. And subscribe to Underrated Black Voices for more stories that were never supposed to be heard, but needed to be told. Until next time, say loud, say true, and never stop reminding them. We've always been in charge.